Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering a build I'm calling the Tag Team Destroyer, because this build acts as a force multiplier, massively increasing the damage of its melee allies. When paired with another high damage melee character like a paladin, monk, or rogue, this build not only outputs significant damage and utility itself, but heavily increases the damage output of your party. Dungeons & Dragons combat, I think, often devolves into individually strong builds, each sort of doing their own thing. But if you want your team to play as a team, this is the character for you. For that reason, I think it's actually really fun to play and great for a co-op run with a buddy or something along those lines, because the tactical possibilities of synergizing this character with an ally are extremely satisfying and definitely make for a more cooperative playstyle than the standard Dungeons & Dragons builds, each of which operate more or less independently. This character is intended as a companion build to my build from last week, the Best Buddy, but doesn't have to be paired with that build in order to be effective. It works with any high damage character, and that character will work with any other high damage melee character itself, but together the two will have incredible synergy and be the perfect tag team duo to take down your enemies and trap them in a storm of blades from which there is no escape. Before I begin, I want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Josh Hobbs for the $10 donation, Eric Dragone for the $10, Patrick Lowry for the $2, Neil for the $5, and Melianne Hawk for becoming a channel member. Thank you so much, my friends. The support really does mean a lot, and I really do appreciate it. Alright, let's get in and start building the Tag Team Destroyer. We're using Karlach as the example character here, because this build is going to use one of, in my opinion, the more underrated subclasses in the game, the Wolf Totem Barbarian. Wolf Barbarian pairs with other allies to give them advantage, giving you an incredible amount of additional hit chance on all of your attacks. So with high damage attacks, or attacks that benefit from critically hitting, like Paladin attacks, you get an enormous amount of additional damage with a Wolf Totem Barbarian. If you're building this character as a main character or a custom character, then I recommend that you build it as a Wood Elf or half Wood Elf, because the bonus movement speed is incredibly valuable. This character wants to be adjacent to its melee partner, and so being able to reposition to do that is extremely useful. For the same reason, Githyanki could be pretty good. Other than that, half Orc is also excellent because we'll be getting a lot of critical hits in melee, and so the additional critical hit damage is very valuable, and the Relentless Endurance is also excellent. So half Orc or Wood Elf are probably the best races for this build if you're building it not as Karlach. Karlach, of course, is also excellent because she gets the Soul Coin bonus damage in Rage, which is great for any Barbarian build. As always, the first thing that we have to do is fix our attribute spread, because of course Karlach's default attribute selection, like every other character, has a bunch of odd numbers and is very poorly put together, so we need to fix that. Because this is a strength character, there's two different ways that we could go about this. We could either just build a normal attribute selection with a high strength, high dexterity, and high constitution, good for any melee character with a 16-14-16, 8-12-8 split, or because this is a strength-based build in Baldur's Gate 3, like every other strength build, we have the option of using elixirs of Hill Giant strength instead of investing any points into strength at character creation. So if you're going that route, you'd want to remove all your points from strength and just go with the greedy attribute split that emphasizes only single numbers of 17, 16, 15, and then you're going to drink an elixir of Hill Giant strength to set your strength to 20 every day. I'm going to be assuming for the purposes of this guide that we aren't doing that, but obviously it's an option that's extremely powerful and worth mentioning anytime that it is available for strength-based characters. However, for sort of our default character build, we're going to go with the very standard attribute spread of 16, 14, 16, 8, 12, 8, which I should emphasize this character is totally happy with. You get plenty of feats and don't need the elixirs to make this character function in any way, but that will allow you to take a couple extra feats and power up your character more if that's something you're happy doing, just drinking an elixir every day. For our skill selection, we are going to... There's nothing particularly important for our skill selection, honestly, except for athletics. Although, because barbarians do get perception, you should almost always take it. Every party needs as many perception rolls as high as possible, and so any character that can select perception almost invariably should, in order to make it easier to detect traps. Athletics is going to be very helpful for this character for two reasons. One is that, of course, being able to resist shoves is very powerful, and shoving and throwing and whatever is always good. But two, you're always going to be partnered with another melee ally. So the athletics, allowing you to shove enemies in various positions, is going to give you the option to push them down off of cliffs so that your melee and then they fall prone, so your melee ally can go attack them while they're prone. Giving you just a bunch of extra options for repositioning your enemies matters even more for this character. You can also push them into an ally who can't quite move far enough in order to get into melee range. For example, if you have this character as a wood elf, then because you're a barbarian, you're going to have 45-foot melee, 45-foot movement range. If you have a paladin with only 30-foot movement range and the enemy's 35 feet away, this character can move 35 feet, push the enemy back towards you so your paladin can hit them, and then also come back with their extra movement speed so that you can both get into range. So it's really useful to have athletics to reposition enemies on this character. Alright, no other major decisions to make at level 1, so let's move on to level 2. At level 2, we get Reckless Attack, which obviously is very powerful for every barbarian, but is especially notable for this barbarian. Not only do you get advantage on your attack rolls, it can be extremely valuable to manually trigger Reckless Attack, using it as an attack rather than just as a reaction when you miss, in order to deliberately give your enemies advantage against you. Enemies in Baldur's Gate will choose their targets in part based on how easy it is for them to land their attacks, and so deliberately giving your enemies advantage can be used as a sort of aggro mechanic in order to force them to target this barbarian. Obviously, as a barbarian, you're better set up for taking hits than any other character, and since you'll always be partnered up with another melee character, you are going to be absorbing hits for a squishier ally, which is an extremely valuable thing to be doing. Plus, if you are, as I recommend, paired up with the Best Buddy build, that build uses the Sentinel feat to get extra attacks whenever an adjacent ally, such as this character, is attacked, and so you can use Reckless Attack to deliberately trigger enemy attacks to get additional Sentinel attacks from your ally. That synergy lets you get way more attacks per round than you would otherwise, as well as causing the enemies to target the character that you want them to target by deliberately increasing their chance to hit, to make this character a more attractive target. Now, what you don't want to do, usually, is deliberately reduce your armor class on this character. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to items, but it's better for them to think they can hit you and miss than it is for them to just always be able to hit you. But just triggering Reckless Attack and giving them advantage, as long as your partner character has decent armor class, will usually be enough to draw enemy aggro and force them to attack this character instead, as well as the other ways that we get to manipulate aggro, which are extremely useful as well. That gives you a bunch of extra tactical options and makes this character just a better partner for every other melee character, although of course the main thing that we're going to get is at level 3. At level 3, we get to take Wildheart Barbarian, which I think is one of the more underrated subclasses in the game. Wildheart Barbarian has an extremely powerful ability that increases your melee allies' damage output massively by making them hit much more reliably and also increasing their chance at critically hitting. But for some reason, you rarely see this included in builds, I think probably because it doesn't put up flashy numbers for YouTube highlights, but it's going to increase the damage output of your party as a whole by an extraordinary margin. Wildheart Barbarian gives you two abilities. One is Inciting Howl, which while raging, you can use this as an action to make your enemies 10 feet faster for one turn. Unfortunately, this ability is terrible, not only because that's just a bad use of an action, because you'd much rather be attacking and outputting damage, but also because of the embarrassing problem that it has, where if you use this as an action during your rage, what you aren't doing is attacking during your rage, which means that your rage is going to end. It's honestly baffling that they gave this action as an action, guaranteeing that players are going to accidentally use it and end rage. And while there are some very narrow circumstances where it can come up, as a good heuristic, you will be better off just forgetting that this ability exists. However, the other ability makes up for it, and that is that your allies have advantage on melee attack rolls against enemies within 7 feet of you, so enemies that you're adjacent to. That will increase their damage output enormously, especially in the early game. Since we're getting this ability at level 3, sources of advantage are actually quite hard to come by, and not only does it make it much more reliable for them to land hits, which is especially valuable for characters who have Great Weapon Master later on, or characters who are trying to land sneak attacks and only get 1 attack per round, and so on. It also increases their chance at critically hitting it enormously, because you're just much more likely to get a critical hit if you have advantage. This is especially true if you have ways to increase your critical hit chance, like gear and so on. So this plays extremely well with any ally who's trying to land critical hits, like a rogue or a paladin. This means that both you and your allies will have advantage basically all the time between this and extra attack, and so you are almost never going to miss. You're always going to be able to land sneak attacks. It's just an incredibly powerful effect, although obviously you'd be able to land sneak attacks anyways, because you will be threatening that enemy, but this means that you're actually likely to land those hits, and then you will get double the chances at critically hitting, which improves your damage output enormously. It's hard to overstate how good permanent passive advantage is, and this character just gives that to you for free, just for the cost of your rage charge, which obviously you were going to use for most fights anyways, and increases the damage output of melee allies enormously. This can also even be used to turn ranged allies into reasonable melee attackers. Even characters that aren't spec'd for it can sometimes land damage if they are, stuck in melee and can't get away without provoking an opportunity attack or whatever. You can often land damage with your weapon set even if you aren't spec'd into that weapon set, because advantage is just that big a boost. Not something that's going to be a primary strategic plan for you, but definitely something to keep in mind, especially in the early game where you might have gotten your backline jumped by a melee character and just need them to punch them or whatever for the extra 3 damage to finish them off. This also, because it's melee attack rolls, it works on melee spells as well, like Shocking Grasp or Inflict Wounds, so it's going to be really useful in those circumstances. Altogether, this ability just adds so much damage output and utility to your party that I think it's bizarre that it's overlooked so often, and is definitely worth building around, especially when paired with a character like the Best Buddy build that benefits so strongly from it. That being said, there's not any other choices to make it level 3, so let's move on to level 4. Level 4, we get to take our first feat, and we're going to take one that might look a little unusual and that people often have some trouble understanding why we would take it so early, and that is Great Weapon Master. Great Weapon Master gives you the ability to make extra attacks, or when you either critically hit, and remember we have reckless attack, so we're going to critically hit more often, or kill a target with a melee weapon, and also lets us trade -5 to hit for +10 to damage. This is a huge amount of damage boost because we have reckless attack, so we're always going to be attacking with advantage, which basically negates the penalty of Great Weapon Master. You always want to get Great Weapon Master very early. I think that both it and Sharpshooter are extremely worth picking up at level 4 as soon as you can get them, and if you find that your hit chance is extremely low against a specific enemy, you can always just toggle it off, and if you just need to land like the extra few points of damage. In general, it will always be more average damage to have this on, average damage per turn, although there's some times where you want to turn it off. Usually if your hit chance is like 25% or lower, then you want to turn it off, or if you just need as high a hit chance as possible against a very low health enemy and want to take them down. Combined with Reckless Attack, this fills 3 strategic considerations for this build. 1 is obviously doing a lot of damage, and 2 is forcing enemies to attack you, and 3 is supporting your allies because you are able to get the amount of damage that they need in order to land finishing blows, even on very tough enemies. So Great Weapon Master is the perfect feat for this build. At Barbarian level 5, we get access to extra attack and fast movement, and remember I mentioned that fast movement is pretty useful for like shoving enemies and just being in position to support your allies. Extremely useful to have this. At level 6, we get to choose between our animal aspects, and there's actually 3 different options here that I think are all really interesting and really powerful in different circumstances. This is going to depend a little bit on who your melee partners are, whether you're using the best buddy build that I recommended last week, or whether you're using a different melee ally. First, of course, there's always Aspect of the Beast Elk, which is just excellent for every character. 5 feet of bonus movement speed for your whole party is a pretty nifty passive benefit. It's, you know, half of Longstrider, and Longstrider is one of the most useful effects in the entire game, so it's just great to have. It's especially useful for this character because you're always going to be nearby your allies since you're partnered with them, and so your additional movement speed is going to affect them all the time. They'll always be within the move speed aura and benefiting from the additional movement speed. Another option is to take Aspect of the Beast Tiger. Tiger gives you your strength mod to attack rolls against poisoned or bleeding targets. And so if you or your allies have the weapons that give you additional bleeding damage attacks, the lacerate, like short rest weapon actions, you can use this to make your attacks much more likely to land. Secondly, if you have an ally who likes to use poison weapons, and if you're using the best buddy build, that character attacks a lot, and so really loves to poison its weapons, then you are going to be benefiting extremely strongly from Aspect of the Beast Tiger, because enemies will almost always be poisoned. This way you can guarantee that your ally lands attacks because of the advantage, and they can guarantee that you land attacks because of the poison that they're dishing out. Finally, if you have an ally who inflicts tons of bleed, say, for example, you're playing with a monk who is using the Lesser Infernal Gauntlets to attack and have the bleeding damage from the unarmed strikes on those, then you can benefit from Aspect of the Beast Wolverine to lock down enemies. Enemies who are maimed can't move, which is obviously extremely powerful, locking them inside of your blender of destruction between you and your allies, if you have enough bleeding damage to make it trigger reliably. Any of these 3 are going to be extremely useful and extremely powerful, and I recommend choosing between them based on your party. As a great default, though, we're just going to take Elk, but if you're working with the best buddy build, then Tiger is really good if you're willing to, you know, apply poisons in most fights, or if you're working with a character that applies a lot of bleeding, then Wolverine is also very powerful. All of those can work extremely well and be a great addition to your party. At level 7, we get one of the best class features in the entire game, Feral Instinct. +3 bonus to initiative is huge. This character will now have a +5 bonus to initiative, or more if you're the Elixir build, or have other ways to increase your initiative, which are all very good. And if this character and your ally go first, then you can mix and match their turns. You can mix and match their actions within the turn. So you can have this character move up to an enemy and rage, have the ally move up to that enemy and attack with advantage, and then go back to this character's turn, have them attack, and then, if the enemy is still standing, move away. If you're partnered with a ally with Sentinel, you can use that opportunity attack to trigger the Sentinel attack, which gives you some additional attacks on your turn if you do it that way. Being able to mix and match your turn with your ally, with your buddy, is going to be an incredible amount of additional damage, and also will help out a lot when you're playing co-op as well, just to make it a little more clear, just so that people don't have to sit around waiting and can do both stuff on their same turn. And of course, all the mechanical benefits of winning initiative are just as good on this character as on every other character, because enemies will be dead before they can go, which is obviously great. Also, not being able to be surprised is a nice benefit in a lot of story encounters, and will help you out a lot as well. Finally, at Barbarian level 8, since we've gotten to 7 to get Feral Instinct, we might as well hit 8, we get to take an additional feat, and the one we're going to take is just to increase our strength. Now, if you are the Elixir build, then there are definitely some other options here. You won't need to increase your strength, and you'll already have Great Weapon Master, so we can take some additional feats. Probably the best is going to be to take Sentinel. If paired with another character with Sentinel, there's even more synergy, because then no matter who they attack, you get to hit them with the other person, as well as it locks them in place preventing them from moving away from your dangerous duo. Another option, of course, is always Alert. Alert is just incredible and the best feat in the game for honor mode for sure, and so it's one that is worth taking on any character that can support it. And then finally, there's some other options, like Mobile is pretty interesting for this character as well, although the fact that you have Land Stride does remove some of the benefits of it, because Land Stride that you get at Barbarian level 8 is actually quite good for this character also. Normally, melee characters can just jump over difficult terrain using their bonus action without suffering a penalty, but that's not really true for barbarians who need their bonus actions to rage. Because you are at a bonus action deficit compared to other melee builds, the ability to just walk through difficult terrain and not have to jump over it means that you are much more likely to get into the location that you need to be in order to actually effectively help your party by providing advantage, and of course just by hitting things. This also has the secret advantage that you can walk freely over spike growth and plant growth while you have Land Stride, which pairs perfectly with a druid ally. A wild shaping druid who wants to lay down spike growth and concentrate on it while in wild shape, or lay down plant growth to trap enemies in place, is another excellent partner for this character because, of course, wild shape druid attacks benefit extremely strongly from advantage on all their attack rolls, and so this character pairs very well with wild shaping druids as well, and now can operate freely inside their damaging fields or their difficult terrain fields without being in trouble. There's just a lot of internal synergy that this feature has, and it's deceptively strong. It's way better than it actually looks. At Barbarian level 9, we could continue on to level in Barbarian, taking Brutal Critical for some additional damage, although I will say that this class feature does significantly less damage when you actually do the math than it looks like it's going to do. And so, while it's certainly an option, you'll get a lot of critical hits. If you're using a Great Axe, you can benefit reasonably well from Brutal Critical. I think that we can actually do better than continuing on in Barbarian past level 8. We've gotten all the best things from Barbarian anyways. For that reason, I'm going to recommend that we deviate at this point and go into Fighter, because Fighter gets us a fighting style and a heal, and the bonus action heal is not totally irrelevant. It's actually pretty useful for this character who's going to be taking hits occasionally. And the fighting style lets us either take great weapon fighting for additional damage, or defense just to increase our armor class. If enemies are attacking you regularly and you want them to miss, defense is always great. Just +1 bonus to AC is a nice bonus for every character, of course, and great weapon fighting works very well if you just want to do more damage. So I'm going to recommend that we take this, because often characters being dead is better than characters missing, but either way, they haven't done anything on their turn, so both of those things are good, and if you feel like you need the additional AC, this can be useful. An alternate way to play the character at this point, incidentally, is to scrap the Great Weapon Master feat and just play as a sword and board barbarian with a one-handed weapon and a shield and protection style, and then you can use this to protect your allies as well while in melee. Since you'll always be up close with other allies, protection fighting style is extremely powerful and can prevent a lot of incoming damage with your reactions, so that's an additional option if you find that your melee ally partner is getting hit a lot. This is especially useful, I think, if you have like a monk or something a little squishier, or a rogue that isn't easily able to hide all the time, then protection fighting style can be a good option, but by default we want to stay two-handed, so we're going to go with great weapon fighting. At Fighter level 2, we get Action Surge, which obviously just lets us hit things really hard and really frequently. And something that I think sometimes gets lost in Baldur's Gate 3 builds is just how much damage an Action Surging Great Weapon Master fighter does. Between Rage, Reckless Attack, and Action Surge, we're going to be hitting basically all the time, with 4 attacks, each of which does a flat 10 extra damage on our Action Surge turn. So that's just 40 flat damage, even before we count our strength or any of the additional damage dice that we might have from our weapons or other things, other effects. There's just a lot of damage, so even in this relatively not damage-focused build, on our Nova turns, where we really want to do a bunch of damage, you can expect damage numbers in the 150 to 200 range if you have decent gear, and that is certainly no slouch, and combined with a high damage partner is enough to bring down just about any enemy in a single round. At fighter level 3, we get to take Battle Master, which gives us access to a variety of maneuvers to help out our allies, as well as do a bunch more damage. Now, you could take a different fighter subclass. Eldritch Knight for the shield spell is actually pretty good, since we intend to be attacked a lot, so you can make enemies miss, as well as getting Champion Fighter, which is not terrible if you want to do a lot more critical hits. This build will be critically hitting reasonably regularly, but Champion Fighter damage is going to be less than Battle Master damage overall, just because the maneuvers do a lot more additional damage, and the maneuvers give us a bunch of cool effects that we wouldn't otherwise have access to. The maneuvers that we're going to use here are Precision Attack, which lets us just much more reliably land our Great Weapon Master attacks, which obviously is incredibly powerful. The Precision Attack represents an enormous damage increase when you are likely to miss your attacks, and Great Weapon Master attacks are hit so hard individually that any increase to your chance to hit is very valuable. And we're going to take Riposte, because then, even if the enemy attacks us, we often get off-turn reaction attacks as well. This means that we will be able to get multiple off-turn attacks combined with an ally with Sentinel, so you can cause an enemy to attack this character, and then if they miss that attack, you get to hit them with your ally, and you get to hit them with this character, doing a ton of off-turn damage. In fact, that's going to be so much off-turn damage, it will often kill enemies before they get to take their turn, which then frees up, or before your next turn, which then frees up your next turn to move on to the next target. This means that this character is going to end up being very efficient in terms of its use of reactions, especially when combined with another ally with the Sentinel effect, with the Sentinel feat. Finally, we are going to take as our third maneuver, one that I don't recommend that often, but that is actually really good here, Goading Attack. Goading Attack does additional damage and gives enemies disadvantage when attacking your allies. This fills 3 functions for this character. One is protecting your allies, because enemies are less likely to hit them. 2 is causing your enemies to attack you more reliably, which, combined with Reckless Attack, Goading Attack means that they have approximately a +8 to +10 bonus to hit this character compared to your allies, so they are extremely likely to target this character compared to your ally, which you want for various reasons, for tanking as well as for dealing additional damage. And finally, it just does a bunch of extra damage because it's got the extra d8 of damage, and you're more reasonably likely to critically hit when attacking with it, thanks to Reckless Attack as well. Now, you can't manually activate Goading Attack and Reckless Attack on the same maneuver, but you can reactively use Reckless Attack if your Goading Attack would have missed. Attack. Obviously, all of the other good maneuvers here are still excellent. You can still take Trip Attack, you can still take Pushing Attack, and you can still take Menacing or Disarm, and those will all be awesome, of course, but Goading Attack is so synergistic and so powerful for this build, and also one that we don't get to actually use that often, so I think it's really fun and very powerful to take it here. Finally, for character level 12, we get to take our last feat. If you are this version of the build, we're just going to go ahead and max out our strength, because hitting is very good. It's just good to land your attacks. Although, if you are finding that your to-hit chances are already very high, and they may well be, thanks to advantage and precision attack and so on, if you have, like, Bless on an ally or something buffing up this character, it may be worth considering staying at 18 strength and taking Sentinel on this character anyways, because it's so synergistic with another character with Sentinel. If you both have Sentinel, it doesn't matter who they attack, they're going to take a hit from one of you and a riposte attack from the other one, and that's going to be a lot of off-turn attacks, which lets you chain from enemy to enemy much more efficiently. So if you feel like you are landing your attacks regularly enough that you don't need the extra strength, Sentinel can be good even on the non-Elixir version of the build. On the Elixir version that already has Great Weapon Master and Sentinel, I think that the best third feat to take is going to be Polearm Master, because there are some polearms that are best in slot for this character anyways, or very good for this character anyways, and so Polearm Master plus Sentinel is an incredibly synergistic combination. Or if you aren't using a polearm, then you could just go ahead and take Alert, because Alert is excellent on every character. For items for this character, there's a couple different directions that we can go. Either you can try to get your AC high enough that enemies will frequently miss you even when attacking you with advantage, or you can just try to absorb damage that's incoming through damage reduction effects. If you're trying to boost your armor class, then you're going to want one of the the medium armors with uncapped dexterity so that you can benefit from the highest possible dexterity. This is especially useful if you're the elixir build and have higher dexterity, or even if you're using the gloves of dexterity to boost your dex even higher. Something like the Armor of Agility plus the Gloves of Dexterity can get you up to 22 AC, where enemies will be regularly missing their attacks even if they are attacking you with advantage. Another option is to try to do damage reduction with stuff like the Bone Spike Garb, which gives you the additional temporary hit points as well as additional damage reduction on every attack, and so will mean the enemies will hit you much more reliably, but you'll take less damage overall when they do, thanks to the damage reduction and temporary hit points. You're going to have to decide from sort of level to level how regularly you're getting hit or not, and I can't give you an exact level-by-level guide. It's going to depend pretty heavily on the rest of your party and sort of how quickly you move through different encounters and so on. But basically you have those two options, either to try to tank through the damage or to try to avoid the damage, depending on how easy it is for your enemies to actually hit you. In the sort of early to mid game, you're probably going to want to be doing both, using the Adamantine Scale Mail, because that reduces damage, but also has excellent armor class. So it is a pretty reasonable way to get a mixture between the two. Next, you're going to want the highest damage two-handed weapon that you can find, just because we like to hit with two-handed weapons, especially good with great swords if you have great weapon fighting, because re-rolling both the d6s represents more damage increase. So great swords or other weapons that roll multiple damage dice are particularly good. Whatever great sword or two-handed weapon just has the highest damage number at the top is what you're looking for here, so I won't recommend a specific weapon for that, just whatever you happen to have at that stage of the game that does the most damage. However, there are a couple specific weapons that are pretty interesting for this character. One is the Skin Burster, which gives you additional damage reduction with Force Conduit. It reduces damage against the affected enemy per turn remaining, and you get additional stacks of it every time you hit. Between Action Surge and Extra Attack, you're going to get a lot of stacks of Skin Burster damage, even though you don't have AoE attacks, and you're also going to be attacking off-turn frequently with this character, thanks to Riposte and just generally triggering attacks of opportunity. So it will be pretty easy for you to maintain very high stacks of Force Conduit, getting very high damage reduction as a result. Then, combined with giving disadvantage on enemy attacks against your allies, thanks to Goading Attack, and giving advantage on enemy attacks against you, enemies will target you, but with the Bone Spike Garb and the Skin Burster stacks, you will be taking, and your natural rage damage resistance against physical damage, you're going to be taking almost no damage from physical enemies. Another example, if you want a sort of more damage-oriented build, is to use Falar Alluve, which has the Shriek ability. Shriek means that enemies within 20 feet of you take an additional d4 thunder damage whenever they're attacked. If you're paired with the Best Buddy build, that build is making 8 attacks per round on average, is regularly making 8 attacks per round. Adding 8d4 of thunder damage to your attacks is a lot, especially when you take into account that gets multiplied by critical hits and so on. Also, on Tactician mode or below, this weapon is bugged and counts as a damage rider source, so it can add in even more damage, like it will give you your rage damage again every time and so on. But on honor mode, it will still just be an awful lot of damage if you're using Falar on this character. Notice that it's a versatile weapon, so you can still use it two-handed, or if you're the shield version of the build, you can just go ahead and use it one-handed. When combined with the Armor of Agility, you can have 23 AC with just like a normal shield, and that's a very powerful effect as well, even before you add in like other things that increase your AC and other things that increase your AC or dexterity. Finally, anything that does retaliation damage, like the Flesh Melter Cloak, can be pretty fun on this character. You're intending to get hit anyways, so you can gain some benefit from that, although probably not at the expense of just default good things like Misty Step boots or additional damage reduction, additional armor class, additional saving throws, and so on. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the Tag Team Destroyer, and as always, of course, if you've enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a comment and like the video. It helps me out a ton with the algorithm, and you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game content. Cheers, folks. I'll catch you next time.